The paper slid across the table and stopped right in front of me. My son didn't look at my face when he said it. "Just sign here, Mama. It's already done." My name was printed at the bottom. Not written. Printed. I picked it up with both hands. The room was quiet except for the hum of the ceiling fan and my daughter-in-law tapping her nails like she was bored with the whole thing. I read the first line. Transfer of controlling shares. My chest tightened, but my voice stayed steady. "Already done?" I asked. My son sighed like I was slowing him down. "Yes, we had to move fast. The business needed stability." That word, stability. They always use pretty words when they're about to cut something out. I turned the page slowly. My hands did not shake. I noticed my daughter-in-law smile when she thought I wasn't looking. She leaned back and crossed her arms. "You don't really handle these things anymore," she said. "This is better for everyone." Better for everyone. The room felt smaller, not because it was crowded, but because I could finally see how tight the circle had become around me. I stayed quiet. I kept reading. That was when I saw it. My signature had already been scanned onto the last page. Not signed. Scanned. A copy of my name, lifted from somewhere else, pressed onto something I had never agreed to. My son cleared his throat. "We assumed you'd be fine with it," he said. "You always say you trust us." I looked up at him. I stayed quiet. They thought I was broken. That was their first mistake. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I folded the paper once, then again, then laid it flat. "I need a moment," I said. My daughter-in-law rolled her eyes. "Mom, it's just paperwork," she said. "You don't need to make this dramatic." Dramatic. I stood up slowly. My knees hurt, but I didn't let it show. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot of the office building where our family business had started 32 years ago. I remembered every brick, every late night, every risk. But I didn't say any of that, because something worse was happening. They weren't asking. They were informing. And that meant the decision had already been made without me. That was the betrayal. Not the paper. Not the forged signature. The betrayal was the certainty in their voices. The confidence. Like I was already gone. That's when I turned back around and said softly, "Give me the pen." My son looked relieved, too relieved. He slid it toward me like he'd won. Before I signed, I looked at him one last time. "You're sure this is what you want?" I asked. He nodded. My daughter-in-law nodded too. "Yes," she said, "this is best." I smiled. And I signed. After that, I went very quiet. Not the kind of quiet that begs. The kind of quiet that listens. They talked over me after that, about next steps, about restructuring, about how I wouldn't need to come in anymore. I nodded when expected. I asked no questions. That's when the real piling on began. By the next morning, my phone was full. My niece called first. "I heard you step down," she said. "Are you okay?" I paused. "I didn't step down," I said calmly. "Oh," she replied, "that's not what they said." Click. Another call. A cousin. "They said you were tired," he said, "that you wanted out." I let the silence stretch. "They said you're finally letting go," he added. Letting go. I thanked him for calling and hung up. By lunchtime, the story had grown legs. I was sick. I was confused. I was slowing things down. People stopped asking me questions and started informing me of my own life. That's when I stopped answering the phone. They noticed. That afternoon, my son showed up again. He stood in the doorway like a visitor. "You've been quiet," he said. I nodded. "I'm thinking," I replied. He smiled, nervous. "That's good," he said. "You don't need the stress anymore." Stress. Another pretty word. My daughter-in-law stepped in behind him. "We'll handle everything," she said. "You've done enough." Enough. I looked at both of them. "I stayed quiet for a reason," I said. They laughed. Not cruelly. Casually. Like I'd made a harmless joke. That was their second mistake. That night, I opened a box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were old ledgers, original share agreements, handwritten notes from the early days of the business, royalties from a product line that still paid out quarterly. And something else. Something they forgot about. A secondary ledger. One I kept separate. One that showed exactly where the real money flowed. They had taken the front door, but they had never found the back. Before I go any further, let me say something to you, sitting there listening to me. If you've ever felt pushed aside by your own blood, if you've ever watched people smile while taking from you, stay with me. You don't have to rush. Neither did I. If you want to hear how quiet turns into control, press that subscribe button so you don't miss the rest. And if you're listening from somewhere far away, tell me in the comments where you're from. It helps me know I'm not alone. Now listen. The silence changed them. When I didn't call, they grew nervous. When I didn't argue, they grew bold. By the end of the week, my daughter-in-law sent me a message. "We need access to the royalty account." I read it twice, then set the phone down. They were reaching. That meant they didn't have what they thought they had. That was the first crack. I didn't answer. An hour later, another message. The payments didn't come through. I smiled. Not happy. Certain. Because that account was never part of the shares they took. And the document they forged. It didn't touch it. They had taken control of the face of the business. But not the heart. The next morning, they called a family meeting. Not asked. Called. I arrived last. Sat quietly. Listened as my son spoke like a man in charge. Until he stopped. And looked at me. "There's a problem," he said. I folded my hands. "What kind?" I asked. "The royalties," he said. "They're frozen." I tilted my head. "That's strange," I said softly. My daughter-in-law's eyes narrowed. "Did you do something?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at them. And for the first time since the paper slid across that table, they looked unsure. That was the edge. And I stood right there on it. I stayed quiet for a reason. And they were about to find out why. The room felt different after I spoke. Not loud. Not angry. Unsteady. My son shifted in his chair like the floor had moved under him. My daughter-in-law stopped tapping her nails. She looked at him first, then at me, like she was trying to decide which of us had the upper hand. I kept my hands folded. Calm. Quiet. Dangerous. "The royalties don't just freeze," my son said, trying to sound confident. "There must be an error." I nodded slowly. "That's possible," I said. My daughter-in-law leaned forward. Her voice dropped. "You handled those accounts," she said. "Before." Before. I looked at her. "Yes," I replied. "I did." Silence. Heavy. She tried again. "So you know how to fix it?" I waited a moment before answering. "I know how they work," I said. "That's not the same thing." Her mouth tightened. My son rubbed his face. "Mom," he said, "this isn't the time for games." Games. That word almost made me laugh. But I didn't. I remembered. I remembered the night we signed the first partnership papers. I remembered the first order we filled by hand. I remembered how the royalties were structured, split streams, layered accounts, protections built in for moments just like this. Moments when trust failed. "I didn't come here to argue," I said. "You called me." My daughter-in-law sat back. We called you because this affects all of us, she said. I met her eyes. No, I replied, it affects you. That was when her tone changed. Not sharp. Smooth. Controlled. Look, she said, we don't want problems, we just need access. Access. Another pretty word. I leaned back slightly. To what? I asked. She hesitated. My son answered instead. The secondary royalties, he said. The older stream. I nodded again. That's what I thought. The room went quiet. Too quiet. They were watching my face, waiting for fear. They didn't get it. You signed everything over, my daughter-in-law said. That includes all revenue tied to the business. I tilted my head. Did it? I asked. She froze. What do you mean? My son asked. I looked at him kindly. That hurt him more than anger ever could. I mean you took what you could see, I said, not what I protected. He stared at me. Protected. That word landed hard. My daughter-in-law stood up. You're doing this on purpose, she said. I didn't stand. I'm doing nothing, I replied. I'm sitting. She walked a few steps away, then turned back. You think this makes you powerful, she said. I met her eyes. No, I replied. I think it makes me prepared. That meeting ended fast after that. Too fast. They didn't shout. They didn't accuse. They retreated. And that told me everything. By evening, the calls started again. But the tone had changed. Now they weren't telling stories. They were asking questions. Do you still control the old accounts? Can you release the payments? Did you move anything? I answered none of them. Instead, I made tea, sat by the window, and waited. Because when people think they've already won, they show you their whole plan. The next morning, my niece came by unannounced. She didn't smile. She didn't sit. They're saying you're trying to sabotage the business, she said. I nodded. They would, I replied. They say you're bitter, she continued. I smiled faintly. I'm careful, I said. She crossed her arms. Is it true you still control the royalties? I looked at her. Why do you ask? She hesitated. They asked me to convince you, she admitted. There it was. Another crack. I leaned forward. Did they tell you why those accounts exist? I asked. She shook her head. No, she said. They just said it was old money. I nodded. It's protected money, I said. She frowned. From what? I looked at her gently. From moments like this. She left shortly after. Confused. Unsettled. And carrying doubt back with her. That afternoon, my daughter-in-law tried something new. Not words. Pressure. She contacted suppliers. Partners. People who depended on the business. Told them there were internal issues. Suggested I was holding things up. That I was emotional. That I was unstable. But something unexpected happened. They asked questions. They asked me. Because my name still carried weight. And I answered simply. I stayed quiet for a reason, I told them. And every time I said it, their tone changed. That night, my son came alone. No confidence. No posture. Just fear. She says you're trying to ruin us, he said. I looked at him. I'm trying to protect what I built, I replied. You signed it away, he said weakly. I nodded. I let you think that. He sat down hard. What does that mean? He asked. I folded my hands again. It means you finished talking, I said. And now it's my turn. He stared at me. Not angry. Not loud. Afraid. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, the balance had shifted. They didn't know how far this went yet. They didn't know how many people would choose silence or truth, but they were about to find out. Because once quiet stops being weakness, it becomes control. And control doesn't ask permission. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The first thing they tried to take was my voice. They didn't come at me directly, not at first. They went around me like water finding cracks. That morning, I woke up to silence again. No calls, no messages. That kind of silence doesn't mean peace, it means planning. By noon, I knew what they were doing. Celeste called me. "They're telling people you refuse to release funds," she said. "They're saying you're confused." I closed my eyes for a moment. "They've moved from taking to shaping," I said. "Shaping what?" she asked. "The story," I replied. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush. I made tea and sat at the table. "They think if they say it enough," I continued, "people will stop asking me questions." That was the plan. If I became the problem, they wouldn't have to explain the theft. By afternoon, it spread. A supplier called and asked if payments would be late. A partner emailed, careful and polite, asking if I was feeling well. An old friend asked if I needed help managing things. Help managing. That word again. I answered each one the same way. "I'm well, I'm aware, and I'm listening." Some believed me right away. Some hesitated. But hesitation is better than blind trust. That evening, my son came back. He didn't knock this time. He used his key. He walked in like someone who still believed he belonged. "We need to talk," he said. I didn't look up. "We already are," I replied. He stood there, hands in his pockets. "She's scared," he said. "People are asking questions." I nodded. "They should," I replied. "She thinks you're doing this to punish her," he said. I looked at him. "I'm doing this to protect myself," I said. He sighed, frustrated. "You could fix this," he said. "Just release the money." I folded my napkin slowly. "And then what?" I asked. He hesitated. "And then," I continued, "you keep what you took." He didn't answer. That silence told me everything. That night, they tried something else. Isolation. My phone went quiet again, but this time, not because no one was calling. Because people were being told not to call me. I heard it later, piece by piece. "She's upset, give her space." "She's not ready to talk." "She needs rest." They were deciding my limits for me. I let them. Because when someone isolates you, they also isolate themselves from the truth. 2 days passed. Then 3. On the 4th day, the crack widened. A former accountant from the early years called me. "Quiet man, careful voice." "I was told not to contact you," he said. I smiled. "Then why did you?" I asked. He paused. "Because something didn't add up," he said. I listened. "They sent documents," he continued. "Backdated approvals, adjusted share summaries." I felt my chest tighten. "Forged documents. That was a line you don't cross unless you're desperate." "They wanted me to confirm them," he said. I didn't. "Why not?" I asked. "Because I remember how it really was," he replied. I closed my eyes. "That's what memory is for," I said. That night, I opened the secondary ledger again. Not to admire it. To check something. They had tried to reroute payments. Not successfully. But boldly. They were moving faster now. Careless. Fear makes people sloppy. The next morning, my daughter-in-law finally came to me directly. Not in person. In writing. A long message. Polite words, sharp edges. "We need to resolve this quietly. The family is concerned. Your reputation matters." Reputation. She finally said it. I read the message twice. Then replied with one sentence. So does the truth. Within an hour, the pressure doubled. Calls from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Concerned voices. Soft accusations. You're hurting your son. You're embarrassing the family. Why can't you let this go? Let this go. I didn't answer them. I remembered. That afternoon, I did something they didn't expect. I went public. Not loud. Not dramatic. Precise. I sent a short letter to partners and stakeholders. No blame. No emotion. Just facts. Certain revenue streams are protected by original agreements. Any claims otherwise are incorrect. I will address concerns directly when appropriate. That was it. No names. No threats. Just clarity. The response was immediate. Questions. Meetings requested. The story they tried to control was slipping through their fingers. That evening, my son called again. His voice was different now. Lower. Careful. They're saying you planned this, he said. I smiled faintly. They're right, I replied. Silence. You plan to hurt us, he asked. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. I plan to survive, I said. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He asked the one question that mattered. What do you want? I thought about it, then answered honestly. I want you to understand, I said, before it's too late. When the call ended, I felt it. The shift. They weren't in control anymore. They were reacting. And reaction always leaves fingerprints. That night, I slept deeply. Because I knew something they didn't. They thought quiet meant weakness. They thought patience meant fear. They thought time was on their side. But time remembers who built what. And memory was waking up. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the notification bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The email arrived just after sunrise. No greeting. No apology. Just a file attached in one sentence. We need you to confirm this today. I didn't open it right away. I made tea first, sat at the table, let the quiet settle, because urgency is a trick. People rush when they're afraid of what time might reveal. I opened the file slowly. It was a revised agreement. Clean, professional, my name typed neatly at the bottom again. Only this time, something was wrong. Not the numbers. The dates. They were wrong. Too perfect, too smooth, like someone had tried to make the past behave. That was the moment I understood. They forged it, I said out loud to an empty room. Not guessed. Knew. I closed the file and leaned back. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. This wasn't shock. This was confirmation. They hadn't just taken control. They were trying to rewrite history. By mid-morning, the pressure started. My phone buzzed once. Then again. Then again. I didn't answer. Because when people forge documents, they don't want conversation. They want compliance. I waited. At noon, my son showed up. He didn't knock. He stood outside for a long time before finally tapping the door. I opened it and stepped aside. He came in slowly, like someone entering a room they weren't sure they belonged in anymore. They sent you something, he said. Yes, I replied. You need to sign it, he added. I looked at him. No, I said. He swallowed. They said it's just correcting a technical issue. I sat down. Sit, I said. He did. Tell me something, I said calmly. Did you read it? He hesitated. Yes, he said. Did you notice the dates? I asked. Silence. They're wrong, I continued. You know they're wrong. He rubbed his hands together. They said it was necessary, he whispered. I leaned forward. Necessary for who? I asked. He didn't answer. That was when I saw it clearly. He wasn't leading this. He was following. And followers always panic when the leader stumbles. They're asking you to lie, I said, with my name. He looked up, eyes wide. She said it's the only way to protect the business. I nodded. There it is, I said. Protection. Another pretty word. I didn't raise you to protect theft, I said quietly. He flinched. It's not theft, he said quickly. I slid my notebook across the table. Open to a page I'd marked years ago. Original revenue splits. Original signatures. Original ink. This is the truth, I said. That file you sent is fiction. He stared at the page. Then at me. Then away. They said you'd do this, he muttered. Do what? I asked. Turn everyone against them. I smiled faintly. No, I replied. I'm turning the lights on. He stood up suddenly. You're forcing this, he said. I stayed seated. No, I replied. They forced it when they forged my name. He left without another word. But I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. That afternoon, the sabotage began. Not loud. Strategic. A supplier called to say an order was paused. A partner emailed to say payments were being reviewed. A distributor asked if ownership had changed. They were pulling threads, trying to see what would unravel. I answered each one the same way. There is confusion, I said. And it is not coming from me. By evening, Celeste came over. She sat across from me and watched my face. They're scared, she said. Yes, I replied. They're telling people you're refusing to cooperate. I nodded. That's true, I said. I refuse to cooperate with lies. She leaned forward. They forged documents, she said. Yes, I replied. They crossed a line. Yes, I said again. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not from fear. From memory. I remembered the man who helped draft the original agreements. Old, quiet, honest. I picked up the phone and dialed his number. He answered on the third ring. Hello, he said. It's me, I replied. There was a pause. Then a sigh. I was wondering when you'd call, he said. They tried to change the past, I said. I know, he replied. They asked me to confirm it. My chest tightened. And, I asked. I said no, he replied. I closed my eyes. They're panicking, he continued. And panic makes people reckless. Yes, I said. They don't realize how much is still traceable, he added. I smiled faintly. They never do. The next morning, my daughter-in-law tried a different approach. Not pressure. Charm. She showed up with coffee and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Can we talk? She asked sweetly. I stepped aside. She sat where my son had sat yesterday. Same chair. Same posture. Different confidence. We've all been stressed, she said. I nodded. Yes, I replied. Maybe we moved too fast, she continued. I waited. But we can still fix this quietly. Quietly. There it was again. She leaned forward. If you confirm the update, everything goes back to normal. I looked at her. There is no normal after forgery, I said. Her smile froze. You're hurting your son, she said softly. I tilted my head. He hurt himself, I replied. Her voice sharpened. You think people will believe you? I met her eyes. They already are. She stood up fast. This ends today, she said. I stayed seated. No, I replied. It just stopped being private. She left without finishing her coffee. That afternoon, the forged file appeared again. This time, forwarded by someone else. With a note. Is this accurate? I stared at the screen, then replied, "No, just one word. Enough." Within an hour, the file disappeared. Deleted. Retracted. But deletion doesn't erase memory. It confirms guilt. That evening, my son called again. His voice was low, almost broken. "They're saying you set them up," he said. I closed my eyes. "No," I replied. "They walked into it." He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked the question that told me everything was shifting. "What happens if they're exposed?" he asked. I answered honestly. "They lose control," I said. "Of the story, of the business, of you." He whispered, "And me." I paused. "That depends," I said, "on what you choose next." The call ended without goodbye. I sat in the quiet, because I knew what was coming. When forgery fails, liars escalate. They don't stop. They strike. And whatever move they made next would tell everyone exactly who they were. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the notification bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. They didn't come after the money next. They came after me. I felt it before I saw it. That strange pause in people's voices, the way conversations ended early, the way questions were asked sideways, not straight. By mid-morning, the messages started. Not angry. Concerned. Those are the most dangerous. "Are you okay? Someone said you've been under a lot of stress. Do you need help managing things?" Help? Manage? Those words again. I stayed quiet. Not because I was unsure. Because I was listening. By noon, Celeste called. Her voice was tight. "They're telling people you're unstable," she said. I closed my eyes. "How?" I asked. "They're saying you've been confused for months," she replied. "That you don't remember agreements." I nodded slowly. "So that's the angle," I said. Reputation sabotage. When they couldn't take the business cleanly, they decided to make me look unreliable. "They contacted the board," Celeste continued. "Which board?" I asked. "The advisory group," she said. "The one that oversees the royalty stream." I smiled faintly. "They don't oversee it," I replied. "They advise." "That didn't stop them," she said. "No, it wouldn't." An hour later, I received an email. Short. Careful. "We've received concerns regarding recent decisions. We'd like to understand your current capacity." Capacity. That word is a knife when used politely. I read it twice, then closed my laptop. Because now I knew exactly what they were trying. They wanted to isolate me. If they could convince enough people that I was, well, they wouldn't need my permission anymore. I didn't respond. Instead, I made a list. Names. People who knew me before the story changed. People who remembered the early days. People who had seen me make hard decisions without blinking. I called the first name. An old partner. He answered on the first ring. "I was waiting," he said. "For what?" I asked. "For them to get sloppy," he replied. "They're saying I'm not well," I said. He laughed once. Short. Dry. "They said the same thing about me when I didn't sell," he said. I smiled. "What did you do?" I asked. "I told the truth before they could finish the lie," he replied. That afternoon, something shifted. Not publicly. Privately. People started calling me first. Not to accuse. To check. "I just wanted to hear your voice," one said. "This doesn't sound like you," another admitted. "They're pushing hard," a third whispered. Pressure leaves fingerprints. And people were starting to see them. That evening, my son came again. He didn't look angry. He looked scared. "They're asking me questions," he said. I nodded. They should, I replied. They want me to confirm you're not thinking clearly, he said. I looked at him. And what did you say? I asked. He hesitated. I said you're just quiet, he replied. I studied his face. Quiet. He finally understood the difference. They told me if I don't cooperate, everything collapses, he added. I leaned forward. Everything, I asked. The business, he said. The family. I nodded. Or their control, I said. He swallowed. That night, the rumor became a statement. Someone forwarded me a message that had been shared quietly among partners. Due to concerns about judgment, decisions may be temporarily reassigned. Temporarily. Another soft word. I felt it then. The line had been crossed. I didn't panic. I didn't rush. I reached for the one thing they couldn't touch. The trust. Not legal. Personal. The one built over decades. I sent one message. Not long. Not emotional. Just clear. I am well. I am aware. Any claims otherwise are false. I will address this directly. That was it. The response came fast. Too fast. Which meant they were already losing control. My daughter-in-law called me for the first time in days. Her voice was calm. Too calm. You didn't need to do that, she said. Yes, I replied. I did. You're making this worse, she said. I smiled faintly. No, I replied. I'm making it visible. She sighed. You're forcing people to choose sides, she said. I met her words evenly. You already did, I replied. I'm just standing where I've always stood. There was a pause. Then her voice hardened. You think you're smarter than everyone, she said. I leaned back. No, I replied. I think I've been underestimated. She hung up. Hard. By morning, the story had split. Half believed them. Half didn't. That's when desperation sets in. They tried one last thing. Isolation. They told people not to contact me. That I needed rest. That conversations upset me. They spoke for me. Again. But they forgot something. Silence had already taught people to listen harder. And when they tried to block access to me, it raised a question they couldn't answer. Why are they afraid of her speaking? That afternoon, a message arrived. From someone unexpected. A junior partner. Young. Quiet. I was told to avoid you, it read. But something feels wrong. I stared at the screen. Then typed back. You're right. We met the next day. Public place. Short conversation. Careful words. But before we parted, they said something that stayed with me. They're panicking, they said. They didn't think you'd last this long. I nodded. They didn't know why I stayed quiet, I replied. That night, I sat alone. Not lonely. Grounded. Because now the truth had allies. And lies were running out of room. My phone buzzed once more. A message. From my daughter-in-law. Short. Sharp. You think you've won. I didn't reply. Because I hadn't won yet. But I was closer than they knew. And the next move would force everyone to see who had been lying all along. I stayed quiet for a reason. They were still finding out why. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the notification bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. They stopped whispering. That's how I knew they were scared. When people believe they still control the story, they whisper. They hide behind careful words and private calls. But when control starts slipping, they raise their voices. They repeat the lie louder, hopping volume will replace truth. That was what they did next. By morning, the rumor had grown teeth. Not just that I was confused. Now it was that I was dangerous to the business. That word again. Dangerous. They wanted fear to do what manipulation no longer could. I found out from someone I trusted. They're saying you might make reckless decisions, he said quietly, that you could damage everything. I nodded slowly. So now I'm a risk, I said. Yes, he replied, to them. I didn't argue. I remembered. They called an emergency meeting. No invitation for me. That part was intentional. Excluding someone is a way of shrinking them. They wanted me small. They wanted me invisible. They wanted decisions made around me, not with me. What they forgot was this. You don't have to be in the room to control it. If you built the room in the first place. I didn't show up. I didn't protest. I didn't send angry messages. I stayed quiet. That silence was starting to hurt them. Inside that meeting, things didn't go the way they planned. I know because someone texted me while it was still happening. They keep bringing you up, the message said. But no one can explain what you actually did wrong. I smiled faintly. That was the crack. When lies work, they move fast. When they don't, they stall. And stalling is where truth breathes. By the second hour, frustration crept in. My daughter-in-law spoke too much. My son said too little. That imbalance showed. People noticed. They always do. They keep saying you should step back, the message continued. But when asked why, it's all feelings, no facts. No facts. That's when patience becomes power. That evening, my son came to see me again. This time, he didn't sit. He stood near the door like someone, unsure whether to stay or run. They're angry, he said. At me, I asked. At you, he replied, but mostly at themselves. I watched him carefully. They didn't think this through, he added. No. They thought they knew me. They want me to convince you to cooperate, he said. I waited. They said if you don't, things will get ugly. I nodded once. They already are, I said. He rubbed his face. I didn't know they were going to go this far, he admitted. That was the first truth he'd spoken in weeks. I didn't reward it. I didn't punish it. I let it sit. They asked me to sign something, he said. My eyes lifted. What kind of something? I asked. Just a statement, he replied quickly, saying you asked me to handle things. I stayed quiet. He shifted. They said it would make things easier. I leaned forward slightly. For who? I asked. He swallowed. They're rushing, I said calmly. Yes, he admitted. Why? I asked. He hesitated, then said it. Because people are starting to question them. There it was. That night, I made my move. Not loud. Not dramatic. Precise. I sent a single email. To everyone. Short. Clear. No accusations. No emotion. Just truth. There seems to be concern about my judgment. I welcome questions. I will be present tomorrow to address them directly. That was all. The reaction was immediate. Phones rang. Messages flew. Panic does not like daylight. My daughter-in-law called. Her voice was sharp. You're not supposed to do that, she said. I am, I replied. You're forcing a confrontation, she snapped. No, I said calmly. I'm allowing one. She lowered her voice. You don't understand what you're risking. I looked out the window. I understand exactly, I replied. That's why I waited. She hung up without another word. The next morning, people showed up early. Too early. Some looked curious. Some looked nervous. Some avoided my eyes. That told me everything. I didn't rush in. I arrived on time. Not early. Not late. Right on time. When I entered the room, the noise softened. Not silence. Awareness. People were measuring, watching, waiting. I didn't sit immediately. I stood, and I spoke once. "I've heard many things said about me," I said. "I'm here so you can say them to me." No anger, no shaking voice, just steady. No one spoke. Not at first. That silence was louder than any insult. Then someone cleared their throat. A quiet voice. One of the younger partners. "I was told you were, well," they said carefully. I nodded. "I was told that too," I replied. A ripple moved through the room. Another voice followed. "I was told you agreed to step back." I shook my head once. "I didn't," I said. Simple. Clean. My daughter-in-law tried to step in. "She's been under pressure," she said quickly. "We were only trying to protect." I raised my hand. Not sharply. Not aggressively. She stopped. That mattered. "Protection doesn't require silence," I said. "And concern doesn't need secrecy." I looked around the room. "Ask me what you need to know," I said. No one rushed. But no one left either. That was the shift. Then the junior partner spoke again. The same one who had messaged me. "There are documents," they said slowly, "that don't match what we were told." My daughter-in-law turned pale. "What documents?" she snapped. The partner looked at me. I nodded once. "Go on," I said. "They show revenue being redirected," they continued, "and authority assumed without approval." The room changed. That wasn't rumor. That was evidence. My son finally spoke. "What?" he asked. No one answered him. They were all looking at her. She tried to smile. "This is a misunderstanding," she said. But her voice cracked. "Just once. Enough." I sat down then. Slowly. Because now they were listening. I stayed quiet, I said calmly. Because I wanted to know how far this would go. I looked directly at her. And now I know. No shouting. No collapse. Just realization. The meeting ended early. Not with decisions. With questions. That was worse for them. As people filed out, someone touched my arm. Quietly. "We should have asked sooner," they said. I nodded. "Yes," I replied. My daughter-in-law didn't look at me as she left. My son did. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Not powerful. Not sure. That night, I sat alone again. But this time, I wasn't waiting. I was choosing. Because now the truth had a voice. And soon. It would have consequences. I stayed quiet for a reason. And they were finally starting to understand it. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the notification bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The room emptied, but the pressure didn't. It followed me down the hallway, into the elevator, all the way home. Not fear, pressure. The kind that means something is about to break, and everyone knows it. They didn't call that night. That told me they were scrambling. When people believe they still have leverage, they call to threaten. When they don't, they go silent and start searching for something, anything, to flip the balance back. I slept anyway. Quiet sleep, the kind you get when your mind is clear. By morning, the first crack widened. It came from someone I hadn't expected. A message, short, careful. "I think you need to see this. Please don't reply here." No name. But I knew who it was. The junior partner. The one who spoke up. We met before noon. Not at an office, not anywhere familiar. A cafe across town. Busy, neutral, no corners. They arrived early, hands tight around a cup they hadn't touched. "You shouldn't have come alone," I said gently. They shook their head. I didn't want anyone to know. I nodded. Good instinct. They slid a thin folder across the table. Those documents I mentioned, they said. There's more. I didn't open it yet. I waited. Why are you telling me? I asked. They swallowed, because I was told to alter them. There it was. The air changed. To alter how? I asked. They wanted dates adjusted, they said. Signatures added, yours. My hand stilled. They wanted to forge my approval, I said. They nodded. They said you had already agreed, that it was just paperwork catching up. I leaned back slowly. That wasn't desperation. That was a plan. When did they ask? I asked. Last week, they said, before the meeting. Before the meeting. So they weren't reacting to me. They had been preparing to replace me. Quietly. Cleanly. Did you do it? I asked. They shook their head hard. No, I couldn't. I believed them. Because they were scared, but not slippery. Why didn't you report it? I asked. They told me you were unwell, they said, that you didn't know what was happening. I closed my eyes briefly. There it was again. I opened the folder. Inside were copies. Clean scans. Proposed revisions. And one page that made my breath slow. A document with my name typed neatly at the bottom. With a signature that looked almost like mine. Almost. They practiced, I said quietly. The junior partner nodded. They were confident, they said, too confident. Confidence leaves trails. I closed the folder. Thank you, I said. Their shoulders dropped just a little. What happens now? They asked. I met their eyes. Now, I said, you do nothing, and you tell no one. They frowned. That's it. For now, I replied. Silence had worked before. It would work again. By afternoon, the second crack appeared. This one louder. My son called. He didn't sound angry. He sounded shaken. She lied to me, he said. I didn't answer right away. That was the moment I understood, I thought. What did she say? I asked calmly. She told me you signed off on changes, he said. That you asked her to help because you were tired. I closed my eyes. And now? I asked. He exhaled sharply. Now I know that's not true. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't say finally. I let the truth do its own work. She showed me papers, he continued, with your name. I said nothing. They didn't look right, he said. Something felt wrong. I nodded. Because it was, I said. There was a long pause. Then he asked the question he'd been avoiding. Did she forge them? I didn't rush. I haven't accused anyone, I said. I've just been watching. Another silence. He understood what that meant. They were planning to cut you out, he said slowly. Yes, I replied. And use me, he added. I let that land. That evening, the calls started again. Different tone. Different people. Less certainty. More caution. One board member called to clarify. Another wanted to reset the conversation. A third asked if we could move forward together. Together. That word comes back when power shifts. I agreed to one meeting. One. Small. Controlled. I chose the time. I chose the place. They noticed. Before the meeting, I received one more message. From the junior partner. They asked me again, it read, to fix the documents. I typed back one line. Don't. The meeting began politely. Too politely. They spoke carefully. Chose safe words. Avoided names. They were testing where the ground was solid. My daughter-in-law didn't attend. That told me she was calculating. Or cornered. Possibly both. Someone finally said it. There have been concerns about document integrity, they said. I nodded. Yes, I replied. There have. They shifted. "Do you want to explain?" they asked. I leaned forward. "No," I said. "I want you to." Silence. Then excuses. Then confusion. Then someone said the wrong thing. "She handled it," they said, "because you weren't available." I looked directly at them. "I was always available," I said. "I was just quiet." That landed. Hard. That was the moment I understood something important. They weren't united anymore. Fear had separated them. And fear makes people sloppy. I stood to leave. "We'll continue this later," I said. No one argued. As I walked out, my phone buzzed. A message. From her. "We need to talk." I didn't reply. Not yet. Because the next move wasn't about confrontation. It was about exposure. That night, I laid everything out. Not publicly. Strategically. Timelines. Messages. Patterns. And one thing they couldn't explain away. Intent. By morning, the truth had a shape. And a voice. And soon, a witness. I stayed quiet for a reason. They thought silence meant weakness. Now they were learning. It was preparation. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. They tried to get ahead of it. That was their mistake. When people feel the truth closing in, they rush. They move too fast. They explain things that haven't been asked. They create noise to hide a crack that's already spreading. By sunrise, they were already making calls. Not to me. About me. I found out from the same place I'd been finding everything lately. Someone who used to sit quietly. Someone they forgot to silence. "They're saying you misunderstood the documents," the voice said. "That there was no forgery, just drafts." Drafts. That word is a shield. But shields don't work when people have already seen the blade. I didn't react. I remembered. That was becoming my pattern. I received the message an hour later. From my daughter-in-law. Longer this time. Carefully written. Too carefully. "I think there been confusion. We never meant to act without you. Things moved quickly. People made assumptions. We should clear this up privately." Privately. That word again. They loved private. Private meant controlled. I didn't reply. Because the moment you respond, you signal urgency. And I had none. Instead, I made one call. To the person they least expected me to involve. Not a leader. Not a decision maker. A witness. Someone who had seen everything, but had never been asked to speak. She answered on the second ring. "I was wondering when you'd call," she said. I smiled. "So you saw it too," I replied. "I saw more than that," she said quietly. That was the moment I understood. We met that afternoon. She brought her own folder. Thicker than mine. Neater. Organized by dates. Not emotions. "They started changing how they talked to me," she said. "Like I was invisible." I nodded. "They stopped copying you on messages," she continued, "but forgot I had access." Access. Another crack. She slid the folder across. Inside were messages. Not rumors. Not impressions. Words. Clear. Unfiltered. She's slowing things down. We need to move before she realizes. If she hesitates, we step in. My name replaced with she. No respect left. Just urgency. "They planned this," I said softly. "Yes," she replied, "for months." I closed my eyes. Not from pain. From clarity. "They assumed you wouldn't push back," she added. I smiled faintly. "They assumed wrong," I said. That evening, the junior partner called again. "They're scared," they said. "They're blaming each other now." I nodded. That's what happens when lies lose a leader. They asked me to delete files, they added. I leaned back. Did you? I asked. No, they said quickly. I copied them. Good. They're saying you're turning people against them, the partner said. I paused. I'm not turning anyone, I replied. I'm standing still. That always reveals who's moving. The next morning, the fracture went public. Not loudly, but visibly. A meeting notice was sent, then quietly revised. Names removed. Names added. Mine stayed. Theirs changed. That sent a message. And they heard it. My son came to see me again. This time he sat. He didn't rush. He didn't defend. He listened. I didn't want to believe it, he said. I know, I replied. They told me you were losing control, he said. That they were protecting what you built. I looked at him. And now, I asked. And now I see who they were protecting, he said. I didn't answer. Because he needed to finish the thought himself. They weren't protecting the business, he said quietly. They were protecting themselves. Yes. I was supposed to sign something tomorrow, he admitted. I raised my eyebrows slightly. What stopped you? I asked. He looked up. You, he said. Not yelling, not fighting, just watching. That landed. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. Someone resigned. Quietly. No announcement. Just gone. Then another. Then a third. Not big names, but strategic ones. People who knew where the cracks were. People who didn't want to be standing near the collapse. My daughter-in-law called again. This time, she didn't sound calm. She sounded tight. We need to fix this, she said. I waited. You're making this bigger than it needs to be, she continued. I exhaled slowly. No, I said. You made it smaller than it was. She raised her voice. You're humiliating me, she snapped. I leaned forward. You humiliated yourself, I replied evenly. I just stopped hiding it. Silence. You think people are on your side, she said. I don't think, I replied. I observe. She hung up again. Harder this time. By evening, the forgery was no longer a rumor. It was a topic. People weren't asking if. They were asking how far. I received one final message that night. From someone high up. We need transparency, all of it. I replied with one word. Tomorrow. I stayed quiet for a reason. Because silence lets people expose themselves. And now, they were doing it without my help. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the notification bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. By the time tomorrow arrived, the story no longer belonged to them. That was the part they hadn't planned for. They thought control meant speed. They thought power meant pressure. They thought silence meant surrender. They were wrong on all three. The room was full when I arrived. Not crowded. Focused. People sat straighter, phones stayed face down, no one whispered. That told me something important. This wasn't about rumor anymore. This was about reckoning. I didn't open with emotion. I didn't open with defense. I opened with facts. I've been told there are concerns, I said calmly, so let's be clear. I placed the first folder on the table. Dates. Messages. Timelines. No commentary. Just truth laid flat. Someone cleared their throat. Another shifted in their chair. No one interrupted. That was new. I turned the page. These documents were altered, I said. Not accidentally, not quickly. I paused. They were altered deliberately. A breath moved through the room like wind through dry leaves. My daughter-in-law finally spoke. This is being exaggerated, she said. You're reading intent where there was urgency. I looked at her. Urgency doesn't require forged signatures, I replied. No anger. Just precision. I slid the second folder forward. Emails. Messages. Phrases that were never meant to be seen together. She won't notice. We move before she questions it. If she hesitates, we step in. I let the room read. That silence again. Heavier now. My son stared at the table. Not at me. Not at her. At the words. That mattered. They told me you agreed, someone said quietly. I nodded. Yes, I replied. They told many people many things. I turned slightly. But they never asked me to confirm them. That was the moment I understood something else. People weren't angry at me. They were embarrassed for believing them. Embarrassment makes people distance themselves fast. One of the senior partners spoke next. We were pressured, he admitted, to move quickly. I met his eyes. Pressure reveals priorities, I said, not excuses. He nodded slowly. Another voice followed. We were told you were unstable. I didn't flinch. I simply said, that was a lie. No apology demanded. No explanation offered. Just truth. My daughter-in-law stood. This is turning into a personal attack, she said sharply. I didn't look at her right away. I looked at the room. Personal attacks happen in whispers, I said. This is accountability. She froze. She tried again. You're enjoying this, she said. I finally met her eyes. No, I replied. I'm ending it. The junior partner spoke. The one they thought wouldn't matter. I was asked to change files, they said. I refused. A pause. And when I refused, I was told to stay quiet. That was the break. Faces changed. Not all at once. But enough. Someone asked the question they had been avoiding. How long has this been happening? I answered calmly. Long enough that it wasn't an accident. My son finally looked up. He didn't defend. He didn't explain. He asked one question. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I answered him honestly. Because you needed to see it yourself. That hurt him. But it freed him too. The meeting didn't end in shouting. It ended in distance. People gathered their things quietly. Some avoided her. Some avoided me. But most avoided the lie. By afternoon, decisions began happening without noise. Access revoked. Roles paused. Authority questioned. Not publicly. Effectively. My daughter-in-law didn't call again. She sent one message. You didn't have to do this. I read it once. Then deleted it. Because I did. That evening, my son came back. Not angry. Not defensive. Just tired. I chose wrong, he said. I nodded. Yes, I replied. I don't know how to fix this, he added. I looked at him. That's not my job anymore, I said gently. That was the hardest truth he'd heard all day. He left quietly. That night, I sat with the knowledge that everything had shifted. Not finished, but shifted. The lie had nowhere left to stand. And the truth was about to move. I stayed quiet for a reason. They thought silence was weakness. Now they understood. It was restraint. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the notification bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The truth doesn't arrive like a storm. It arrives like gravity. Quiet, certain, impossible to escape. That was how it ended for them. The next few days were slow. Not dramatic. No shouting. No confrontations. No public spectacle. Just movement. Careful, irreversible movement. Access was changed. Not announced, just done. Passwords stopped working. Permissions quietly vanished. Meetings went on without certain names. That kind of silence hurts more than any argument. Because it says, you're already finished. People stopped calling her. Not all at once, but steadily, one by one, like lights going out in a hallway. I noticed it in small ways. Her name wasn't mentioned anymore. Her suggestions weren't forwarded. Her urgent messages went unanswered. No one confronted her. They simply moved around her. That is how reputation dies. My son came less often. When he did, he didn't ask for help. He asked questions. Hard ones. About trust. About loyalty. About what power really costs. I answered calmly. Without blame. Without comfort. Because this wasn't about saving him. It was about letting him grow. She thought you'd fight, he said one evening. I smiled faintly. That's why she lost, I replied. The junior partner was promoted quietly. Not as a reward. As a correction. People who tell the truth become valuable when lies collapse. The witness who brought me the folder. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't need to. Her credibility spoke louder than any request. Doors opened for her. Naturally. And my daughter-in-law. She stayed visible. Too visible. Trying to explain herself to people who had already decided. That's the mistake desperate people make. They think more words can fix broken trust. They can't. One afternoon, I received a message from someone high up. Short. Respectful. We're restoring everything to the original structure. I replied just as simply. Good. That night, I sat alone again. But this time, I wasn't guarding anything. I was finished protecting. The final conversation came days later. Not planned. Not requested. She showed up unannounced. Tired. Controlled. But cracking at the edges. I didn't think you'd go this far, she said. I looked at her calmly. I didn't go anywhere, I replied. You did. You let everyone turn against me, she accused. I shook my head gently. No, I said. I let them see you. That was the moment her shoulders fell. Just slightly. Enough. You stayed quiet, she said. You let it happen. Yes, I replied. Why? She asked. I met her eyes. Because people reveal themselves when they think they've already won. She had no answer for that. When she left, she didn't slam the door. She didn't threaten. She didn't cry. She just walked out. Smaller than when she arrived. That was consequence enough. Later, my son called. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He said one thing. I see it now. I nodded to myself. That's all I needed, I replied. The business continued. Stronger. Cleaner. Quietly corrected. People trusted it again. Because it had survived dishonesty without becoming dishonest itself. And me. I didn't celebrate. I didn't announce victory. I didn't need to. Because I never wanted revenge. I wanted balance. I wanted truth to stand where lies had been comfortable. And I wanted one thing more than anything else. Respect that didn't need noise. I stayed quiet for a reason. They thought silence meant weakness. They were wrong. Silence was control. And by the time they realized why, it was already too late. If this story touched you, please subscribe, like, and turn on the notification bell for more emotional stories like this. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Somewhere out there, I might be reading.